And so next up is Sean Heffley. He's with Logarithm, and he has 20 years of IT experience and 5 years now in cybersecurity. I should also tell you, this is a very important bit of information about Sean. He is a reluctant expert on Disney princesses. You're reluctant. And now, and now Sean Heffley.
Very much so. Because I have four small children, is because I'm reluctant. Is this all right? Can you guys hear me fine? Back there? Can you guys hear me? Raise your hand if you can hear me. It's good? All right, fantastic. Fantastic. So who out there wants to volunteer, put their hands up if they have ever been experienced or got busted by some ransomware? Or no, maybe don't raise your hand. And does anybody know anybody that has gotten caught by ransomware? Okay, I think everybody knows, or at least you've certainly seen the headlines, which we'll cover in a few moments here. But what we're going to cover today, I'm going to spend the first couple five minutes or so just going over a few stats, probably a lot of things you've seen before, just to explain what ransomware is and why you should protect your network against ransomware. And of course, so you can go to your CISO and say, hey, this is why we need to protect ourselves from ransomware. And I'm going to dive in to the common themes of what ransomware does. I'm going to get deep technical on the common themes. Now, there's no silver bullet on catching ransomware. I mean, it's always changing. But I'm going to cover the most basic things you will see as far as ransomware is concerned. And then I'm going to show you how to defend against it, and then we'll bring it all together at the end. So ransomware for the executive team. Obviously, we all know about the threat pandemic out there. This is, of course, just showing the last 10 years, 11 years, I guess you could say. I mean, back in 2006, there was 321 breaches that were reported. Moving on 2010, that tripled. 2015, about 4,000. Obviously, the number keeps increasing, right? So I think we all know you all don't want to be on this list, right? Well, ransomware, as a survey of all the CISOs out there last year, what are your biggest concerns for next year? Ransomware is on every list. That's no surprise, as well as these other things. But ransomware is high on priority on everybody's list. And you will see United States is getting the most detections of ransomware. Of course, this is data from last year. And why? Of course, we have the money, right? We're paying the ransom. We have the money. So they're coming after folks in the United States. I'm sure maybe that might change since I guess the UK got hit pretty hard with WannaCry this last few months. But there's that, and ransomware is in the news, right? You see the headlines. I don't need to read all these headlines to you, but you guys know how huge this is, right? The impact, and you're seeing all the headlines. A few headlines I think are fairly interesting. Montgomery. I have two stories at least. Montgomery County in Alabama. Actually, I'm just going to come down here. I'll try to move back and forth here. I like to talk with my hands, so sorry about that. But Montgomery County in Alabama, they were down for, their whole infrastructure was down for 2 weeks. This just happened this past September. Pretty interesting. They had all their tax appraisals, anything had to do with this adminning the county was down. Even marriage licenses was down for almost 2 weeks, and they paid about $50,000, and then they decided, okay, we need to invest in our infrastructure. I mean, unfortunately, that's what it took to get them to protect themselves. And then, of course, you have the Kansas Heart Hospital. This happened this past May. They paid a ransom, and then, of course, the bad guys said, well, hey, we're going to give you some, and then we want more, right? So they're pretty nefarious. So this, I don't expect you all to read this. This is the history of ransomware. History of ransomware, it started back in 89 was the first case of ransomware, PC Cyborg. They demanded $189, and obviously that was before Bitcoin. But this is what the last 17 years, I believe. You can see it's just exploding, right? Ransomware is becoming bigger and bigger. And of course, as of a few months ago, they projected 50% growth in 2017. I just read last night, I was doing some last minute prepping, maybe updating some slides here, and I saw that it increased 300% this year. I haven't vetted that. I don't know if that's real, but you know it continues to get bigger and bigger. And the threats haven't changed. So you have commodity malware, right? Ransomware, of course, any spyware trying to get money, obviously. You have insiders, think Edward Snowden. A cool story, I was speaking with a prospective customer in Ohio this past spring, and they were talking about how the reason they came to us is because they had some sales folks leave the company, go to a different company, and then over the next few months, they started losing a bunch of deals to this company. And of course, data exfiltration, right? They knew what the bids were. They started undercutting, and that's, of course, a major concern to them. Also, something I see in people's networks, colleagues have seen in people's networks, I haven't seen it, is temporary accounts, right? You have people, maybe an admin who has rights to be able to create accounts. They create an account, use the account, and then delete it within a 24-hour period. That's pretty shady. That happens in people's networks, and we alert on that. Hacktivists, WikiLeaks, Anonymous, terrorists, of course you have ISIS, organized crime. Actually, the FBI did a talk a couple years ago out in Greentree that I attended, and they were talking about those scanners, those credit card scanners. I'm sure you've heard about it. If they have your credit card number, they're able to use these little scanner things and run it through and put the magnetic strip on it. And there's a ring in Pittsburgh a few years ago that they busted where there's people going around a blitzkrieg of running through all the department stores, buying a bunch of merchandise, buying it, and they bust them in their hotel room. I thought that was pretty interesting. And then finally I have, state-sponsored. Obviously there's a lot of that going on, right? You hear about the Russia, North Korea with Sony, United States with Stuxnet. Anybody out here know about Stuxnet? If that's back in 2000, some people, I'm sure many of you have heard of it. But that was where we actually, combined with Israelis, we infiltrated the Iranians, centrifuges, nuclear, whatever, and took about 20% of their centrifuges down. That was back in 2010. And the anatomy of the attack that hasn't changed either. I mean, they're pretty predictable. You have reconnaissance, right? They're going out, they're going to look, they're going to do recon. Who are they going to attack? They're going to do the initial compromise, typically through spear phishing. Command and control, they're going to go out and talk to a server somewhere out there in the world and get the malicious code. They're going to move laterally in your network. You might start seeing a bunch of authentication failures across your network. You should be looking for that type of stuff. They're going to find their target. They're going to have that connection in, the back door, and then they're going to exfiltrate your data. So let's dive into ransomware. I'm going to go through each of these in the following slides. So I'm going to do real quick, just go over, obviously the exploitation, right? The infection happens. Within 5 seconds, they're already talking to the command control server, downloading that code. It happens very quickly, and then they're going to start deleting your backups. That's called backup spoliation, and that's the local, I'll talk about that a little more. And then you have file encryption, and then within 15 minutes, typically it takes about 15, it could be as little as 2 minutes, your files are encrypted. But it could take up to 15, maybe even longer if you have a huge server. Unfortunately, it doesn't hit your server network. It just stays your PC. And then they're going to notify you. So let's dive into each one of these. Here's an example of you might go to a website and you need a font to be able to look at what's on the website. So looks pretty innocent. You hit the update button and then you're infected. That's one way people will get infected. And then of course, you all probably recognize this from the back. You may not be able to read, but I'm sure most people have seen this. This is Microsoft. You have to verify your copy of Microsoft. and you hit the button, and that's, of course, you might get infected with some malware. This is another example of an email you might get. Looks like it's from Bank of America. Looks legit. It's actually coming from a different domain name, right? There's bankofamerican.com. It's not really the legit. It's not legit, obviously, but they're masking themselves that way. And of course, we all know about that Nigerian prince that has $30 million. I've heard the people have replied to this. I don't know anybody who has. And then if I was a bad person, right, and I'm a hacker, I'm trying to find, I want to expose, I want to get some malware on something, or maybe I want to go after somebody like my mother-in-law. I'm putting kitty cats on my little messages. And, I'm sorry, I did this for my wife and kids, and like, oh, you have to make this a little more exciting. So you got kitty cats, and I actually updated last night. My son really wanted Lego Batman, so I put that up there for you. So guys, this isn't real, okay? There's no sororities doing pillow fights, right? Don't click on that link. You get that email. I hope you don't. And but phishing is the most popular way people are getting infected, right? Whether it's an email with a link on, you click on a link, or maybe there's an attachment with some macros, maybe a PDF or something. So that's the most popular. But also you have exploit kits. Exploit kits, if you don't know what exploit kit is, it's malicious software that's going to scan the internet, trying to find legit websites that are vulnerable, and they put their code on that website, and so you, as an unsuspecting user, might go to that website, and then you can get infected. Now, that's, in general, what an exploit kit is, and that's just an example of an infection via an exploit kit. By the way, 8 out of 10 exploit kits come from Adobe Flash. So the paths to compromise, to go along with that, obviously you get the phishing links, right? You click on it, or you're browsing the internet. Most are coming from a browser. But also, you have attachments, right? And all these different attachments that are specified here. Adobe, very vulnerable. Microsoft Office macros. Android is an interesting story. I was doing an implementation of our software, and we have a threat map, and we brought it up for the first time. We're like, okay, we're bringing our firewall logs in, using geolocation. You see a threat map around the world. You see dots all over the place. Lit up like a Christmas tree. Like, wow, you guys are doing business in Ukraine, China, Russia, Kazakhstan. Like, you guys do business. Where's Kazakhstan? Does anybody know where Kazakhstan is? I'm sure some people might know. But it was really interesting. I was like, what's going on here? And so you start looking into it. It's like, okay, so there's one node internally that's talking everywhere, Tor servers and everywhere else. Android. It was an Android device on their network, BYOD device, that was infected and just talking everywhere. I saw that firsthand. I thought that was interesting. So a connection to a command and control. So you're infected now. You're going to go and talk to a command and control server, CNC server. You're at your laptop. Hit the link, and it's really a bad site, right? And then it redirects you to the actual command and control site, and you're going to download that malicious code. That's essentially how it happens. Some ransomware, some different malware is actually self-contained. You don't actually talk to a command and control server, but in general, oftentimes it does. And they're going to deliver it via an encrypted channel. And when they do, oftentimes the executable goes to the app data or the temp directory. That's not a common place where executables should be run from. So that's a dead giveaway that potentially that it's malicious. Also, they're going to set it up for auto execution at restart. So the registry keys, right? They're going to put some registry keys for startup to automatically start the application. So that's another dead giveaway that perhaps, malware or ransomware is running on the machine. People shouldn't be installing, especially if they're not allowed to install software on their PCs. Remove Windows shadow copies. Who here, I assume that most people are pretty technical, who here has PC support for their family and friends? Okay, pretty much everybody. Okay, I certainly am. I have, well, at least for my dad, I've rebuilt his machine a few times. You know about that last known config, last known good config from Microsoft. You know, that's what the shadow copy is in general. So there's processes that actually can run that manage that. If you see VSS admin running on a machine, that's a pretty good indication that perhaps ransomware. Same with WMIC.exe. You know, they're going to delete those shadow copies. Actually, my dad, since I 7 years ago, got married, got 4 kids, I'm like, Dad, I can't help you anymore. He actually has, what was that from Geek Squad, and actually they do a very good job. I'm impressed. He abuses those people. Thank God he doesn't call me on stuff. I'm waiting for the time when he calls me, he has ransomware. I have him set up for a pretty good backup. I was like, okay, Dad, you got to be backing up all this stuff to out in the cloud. So we got that set up. Hopefully, we don't have to restore that at any point. Anyways, moving on. They also they're going to modify your master boot record as well. That's another thing that they're going to do. So here's an example of a new process that's running. You can see the process is 7zb, so on.exe. That's a process. It's a strange name, and it's never ran on this computer before. So that's running. It's running from the app data directory as well, and it starts scanning, right? In this case, this is in a 1-minute period. It starts scanning over 2,600 files. That's a little strange. There's no application running on a PC that should be doing that, unless you're in IT and you're doing something, doing some certain scanning. And then they're going to encrypt, right? They're going to start the file encryption. They're going to get the key right from the internet, from the command and control server, and they usually use very, very strong encryption. And oftentimes they're always going to append the files with something. And WannaCry, they use .wncy. CryptoWall is using file extensions, random ones. Locky uses .locky. By the way, does anybody know that what ransomware was the most profitable year to date, or through the history of ransomware? It's CryptoWall 3.0. It's made, I think it grossed over, it came back, it was around 2015 when that one came out. I think they grossed well over 300 million, 325 million was what I read. But I thought that was interesting. And they're going to notify the user. So blue screen of death. I know we have some younger folks in there, maybe in their 20s, don't know what that is. I'm sure a lot of people out here do know what it is. I went to college when Windows 95 came out, so I'm very, I know blue screen of death very well. So that's, of course, there I have a toll-free number that you can call. That's convenient to do for your ransomware. So these are all, I have a couple screenshots of some ransomware notifications. Here's another one asking for $100. This is from 2013. This is a nice one, Shell Shocker. I don't know if you see this down there, but they even have the gall to say, have a nice day. Here's a couple more. Here, this is the most recent one, WannaCry. This is what WannaCry looks like. In this case, they're asking for $600. They're asking for either $300 or $600 in Bitcoins. I don't know if anybody out here is invested in Bitcoin. I keep on kicking myself. I'm seeing the price of Bitcoin. Last year, I did this talk last year. It was like $700 per Bitcoin. I just checked last night. It's pushing $6,000 per Bitcoin. So if you had the hindsight, right, not the hindsight, we all wish we had the hindsight. If you invested in Bitcoin years ago, you'd be very wealthy. I'm debating just buying one to see how it goes, but I have to get wife approval for that one. I don't know if that's going to work. Anyways, then they're going to clean. Ransomware is going to clean itself up, right? Here's some of the processes they're going to run. This is from our labs team. Put this together. They're just watching what ransomware does, and then that next to last line is actually deleting himself, and then they're giving the instructions to how to pay the ransom. So, what do you do if you get infected with ransomware? What's going to happen? I heard of things. I heard of people who are very savvy that have figured out the crack. Maybe there's some companies you might be able to hire today. I've read that you can. I worked with a dude that actually cracked the user license for info blocks back when I worked at UPMC. I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive that you did that for your home use. But that's possible. But most likely you're out of luck. Okay, you are gonna have to pay that ransom. If you have files on that folder there, you have to pay the ransom, and hopefully they're gonna give you your access to your data back, or you're just gonna have to wipe it and restore from backup. Hopefully you have those files backed up. So let's talk about defending yourself against ransomware. So you should be maintaining backups. Tell Joe in accounting not to put those spreadsheets on the desktop. Not good practice. You should also be on a backup server. You should be having drives mapped out to there, but then have a way that map drives. You're backing up your backups, right? So backups are very important for defending against ransomware, unfortunately. You need to educate yourself and your users, right? Tell Sally, the secretary, don't click on that. There's no $50 Amazon card waiting out there for you, right? If it's too good to be true, don't click it. And of course, you should run books. I know that's kind of boring. A lot of people don't do it. Mature security plans for companies typically have a response plan. For those of you who have your CCISP, I'm sure you are familiar, at least read about it. And patch, you need to patch. Does anybody know what the average time from when a vulnerability is not just discovered, but announced to the public, and that people actually patch their systems? Does anybody know what the average time is? Anybody want to take a guess? 30 days, never, months. 9.5 months, that's probably, I don't even know how that calculates the days. I'm not going to do the math. 120 days is what I read recently, is what I've been told. So, that gives 120 days to think about on average for a malicious hacker person to develop some code and hit that vulnerability. Also, you should be investing in your security, right? Next-gen firewalls, you should have an IDS or IPS, intrusion detection. You should be doing some email filtering. I think there's a vendor here that you might want to talk to about that. You should have good AV. You should have a SIM tool as well, which is what we do. And you need to pay for your security analysts. I'm sure there's folks out here who hire, and it is tough to find. I always hear this. It's tough to find good security. Not just good, but somebody who's willing to work for the price that you're allowed to pay. So I know there's some young folks here who are students who I'm sure you are probably eager to learn and would be fantastic candidates, even though they don't know what the blue screen of death is. Also, least privilege. You should have a least privilege policy out there. I'm in people's networks all the time, and it's amazing how many people don't follow this, right? They have admin rights to everything, things that they don't need rights to. So you should have a least privilege policy out there with your company. You should be correlated against threat lists. There's a lot of companies out there, there's paid and open source threat lists that you can correlate against. Definitely in your IDS/IPS or your SIM tool, you should be correlating with threat lists. You should have good endpoint tools. Obviously updating looking for signatures is one thing, but I heard one of the most effective ways to stop ransomware is application whitelisting. That's, to me, if I'm adminning it, well, I'm sure it's a nightmare to admin, but you think about it, if you're on you're doing application whitelisting, and you're trying to go to GoToMeeting or WebEx, and then, it's blocked, it's put exception. It's kind of a nightmare to manage, but it's the most effective way to lock down your folks from and hopefully not getting ransomware or any other malware. You should be monitoring for the ransomware behaviors that I just described. You should have a password complexity enforcement and insurance policies. They do have insurance. Companies offer insurance companies for other companies specifically for ransomware, believe it or not. So that's maybe something you want to look into. So here's an example of a connection to a command and control node. So right here what I'm showing is you have a list of known bad URLs where ransomware was actually hosted at some point in the past. And then on the other side, I also have a list of IPs that at some point in the past hosted ransomware. So you should be correlating against it. And here's just an alert that came across. This is the logs associated with that alert connection to a threat list. But you can see here, there's a host inside the network named Dorado2 that's connected to this one IP that's actually located in Roanoke, Virginia, but they're communicating with an IP that's on that threat list. So you should be monitoring for that. Here's an example of at least one of our rule blocks. Any SIM should be able to do all this stuff, but in this case, this is looking for files that are executing in the app data and temp directory. Should be happening. You should be monitoring for that on your endpoints. You also should be monitoring those registry keys I mentioned earlier. And you can see there's 4 of them mentioned here, but you should have a product that's monitoring, at least on your servers, right? Monitor your registry for changes or looking for specific keys. You might not want to monitor all your registry keys because that's a lot of logs, a lot of CPU it's going to eat up, but you certainly can. And then you want to be able to contain it. If you, in fact, get ransomware on the endpoint, you want to be able to contain it. You want to be able to kill the processes. It's great to be able to do that, or disable the NIC, or even be able to reach out and shut down the end node. So that's another thing you want to be able to do. So I'm going to bring it all together here. I don't know how I'm doing with time. I think maybe I'm going too fast. I guess we would have some time for a little bit of conversation at the end. But so I'm going to bring it all together. This is the last slide, by the way. So you're sitting in your laptop. You connect to the command control. You're infected with ransomware. So what's going to happen here? First of all, well, you should be doing this, right? You should be getting alerted that, OK, there's a node inside my network that's communicating to a threat list, a known bad IP. You should get alarmed on that. Also, you should be monitoring your endpoints, or at least your servers, saying, there's a process that's never ran before, and it's starting to scan all the files on this computer. You should get alerted with that. And then, hey, there's a new registry key, auto-run registry key that was just installed on this endpoint. You should know. You would want to know about that. And there's many different indicators of ransomware. This is just 3 of them. But it'd be great, at least we could do this, to corroborate all of them. Perhaps have a rule that says, out of these 5 ransomware behaviors, if within a 1-minute period of time, if 3 of these 5 happen within that 1-minute period of time, it's a pretty good chance there's ransomware. So that's, in fact, what this high-risk alert is that there's a pretty good high probability that there's ransomware, and you want to be able to run a script, automate a process to be able to lock that down or disable the NIC. So that's essentially, well, that's all I had. So now typically I wasn't expecting to zoom through this. Maybe I was talking too fast. Hopefully I didn't skip too much. But do we have time for questions?
Yes.
Okay. So is there anybody out there that perhaps wants to share a story? Maybe they want to add to what I've mentioned. Don't challenge me. I don't claim to be an expert. I've certainly read a lot about ransomware. I know a lot about it. But there might be, I'm sure there's people out here that know even more than me. So if anybody wants to share a story, feel free to do so. Or if you have any questions, we can talk about it.
Not all at once. Anybody would admit that they've had ransomware? Has it happened? What kind? Anybody? Standard encryption of files? Yeah.
The bad one, the real bad one.
Yes.
So.
All right. Well.
Yes.
There's actually sites right now out on the internet. It's called Revenge Ransomware. It's part of it. You can actually log into the site, put a company you would like to take down in it, put standard information in it, hit go, and it'll do it itself.
Oh, that's convenient.
For those who didn't hear,
Made freeware out of ransomware.
so it's like outsourced
The code's out there.
codes.
Your information didn't tell it to go.
What's the website?
Yeah.
There are sites out there that actually have
Yeah.
it. There's basically a fill in the blanks as it goes.
Yeah. Ransomware has really it's getting more and more complex and easier to do. There's like this gentleman just said, there's a website out there that you can put the company name in that you want to go after, and they'll go after it for you. I don't know how much you pay for it, but they have chat centers, right? You can, if you get infected with ransomware and you don't know how to buy Bitcoin, they'll help you buy Bitcoin. So that's real, and that's happening. Anybody else have anything they want to add? Oh, feel free. I'll be sitting over there. I actually have to run to pay my respects at a funeral home right after this, but I'll be right back early afternoon. So if anybody wants to stop by and talk to me, I'll be sitting right over there.
All right. Thanks, Sean.
Oh, thank you.
There you go. Quite welcome. Thank you.